All right, let's get down to business. American Horror Stories is lacking. I do not like American Horror Stories. Now, I haven't even discussed really that much on my channel about American Horror Story, and that will change when I get enough time. Everything's on the back burner. I've been playing We Happy Few, and I still got to do that video about that as we get closer to Arthur's end. We're not anywhere near close to that, but honestly, there's a lot of stuff on my plate, so freaking work with me. This is the video about American Horror Stories. The short stories, not the main line stories. First off, I want to go and talk basically about what's happened. And the first 2 episodes were really good and felt like complete stories. Every other subsequent story, lacking and subpar. And when you start off so strong and end so weak, I just really can't understand why. So the first 2 episodes were part 1 and part 2 with Paris Jackson, of course, because she's rich and famous and she needs as much screen time as possible. Just to let you guys know, I really don't think she can act. They try to work with her and they try to surround her with a lot of girls. First, the Rubber Woman, I just want to congratulate them on actually putting lesbians in this, because Ryan Murphy is really known for having gay men all throughout his stuff, and I barely see any women that are gay, and that's just really interesting. It's just like, if you're not the representation who's behind everything, you don't get seen, and I just think that's really interesting. I'm not a part of the LGBTQ plus community, but I still fight for them, and I would love to see them be portrayed the way they want to. But me personally, I like the fact that they actually put lesbians in this, because like I said, American Horror Story is known for having literally almost exclusively men who are gay, and I can see the misogyny. But aside from the characters, I was very upset by the Rubber Woman part 1 and 2, because we didn't see any other characters from the first American Horror Story, and I'll get to the end later. They kind of set us up, making it seem like, oh, we were going to see everybody and talking about it and talking about them, but we didn't see anybody. They were like, oh, there's another doctor here. You want to go talk to him? We know who that is. It's Dylan McDermott's character from the very first episode, very first season of American Horror Story. I personally thought every stories was going to take place in each season. So you started in a murder house. The only logical next step from murder house was asylum. So why was the next one not about asylum? I repeat, why was the next one not about asylum? Why did you make American Horror Stories part 1 and part 2 when you could have made that a whole thing? You could have made it a whole thing, because guess what? The rest of them aren't that long. You should have put more effort into the rest of them. I think you got us hooked with the very first one, part 1 and part 2, because I felt, despite the fact that there was only reference to the first, maybe that would carry everything. I was so ready to see the asylum back and running, or at least something that had to do with the asylum. I was super ready to see the Coven. I was ready to see the black witches that got freaking all killed in Coven. I wanted to see before that. How come we didn't get to see before that, when all the voodoo people were alive? They got shot up by a white man. Just to let you guys know, they all got shot up by a white man. The only person who survived was Marie Laveau. I wanted to see them at their strongest. I wanted to see what came of the new voodoo people. But we don't get to see that. We don't get to see the asylum. I don't need to see Mary Eunice. I don't need to see Mary Eunice. It literally could have been different people. Just like you did American Horror Story. The first one was Murder House. The second one should have been Asylum. The third one should have been Coven. There's absolutely no excuse, Ryan Murphy. There was no excuse for you not to do that. The only reason why he didn't do that is because he probably couldn't think of a good way to make it the way he made the very first episodes, part 1 and part 2. Because I think that's great. Even though we got to see that woman that got killed at night because she wanted to study with her friend when that guy came in and killed her in the murder house. That nurse girl. I just think they're all lackluster. They are all lackluster. The first 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2, were the only ones that I would consider anything. The actual acting is terrible. It's not cheesy like it is in American Horror Story. The Harmons were the staple of American Horror Story. All of their kookiness and quirkiness was still behind great acting. These people either cannot act or they were told to ham it up too much. And I've seen that guy impose I don't know if it's the 4th episode where it's like basically like Jake Paul and Logan Paul, the Paul brothers basically. And they're a bunch of guys and it's just like the bro house or something. It's like the hype house or something. They're trying to make fun of it. And then they get killed by Santa Claus. That was so lackluster. And that Santa Claus looked like Machete. And I thought that was Machete. And I don't know because I haven't looked it up and I don't care really. But I like Machete. And if they were going to do this whole thing where they go to I don't know. I just feel like setting up with Murder House and then having the rest of the stories have absolutely nothing to do with any other. That's why I thought it was going to be a countdown. It was going to be a countdown to the new season, the double feature. This is not a countdown. This is useless. This is useless fodder that doesn't connect to your stories. And yes, if he wanted to do this, if his goal was to do something different, I didn't want something different. I wanted something similar to placate us until the double feature. As your fan, as someone who likes all of your American Horror Story shows, I do not like a single one of your American Horror Stories except The Rubber Woman, which is the only one that actually connects to anything. And if you want to play games and say, oh, well, that Santa Claus was like the Santa Claus that killed in Asylum. Well, guess what? It's not the same person. We didn't even get any inference that it was the same person. We didn't even get any flashbacks to if it was the same person. They used a different actor. It's not that dude that played, was it Blackbeard in Pirates of the Caribbean? Or that dude that played that scepter guy in Game of Thrones who died instantly. They cannot afford him. He is a very good actor. Even though this is supposed to be the same guy who's making American Horror Story, who he was in that for like 3 episodes. That dude was in there for like 3 episodes, but he wasn't there for a lot. You notice he wasn't there a long time because he cannot afford him. He's got all these people on the payroll. He cannot afford that man. He's a very good actor. Machete's a very good actor, but guess what? If that was Machete, we only saw him for 2 seconds. Because I know he wasn't the one that was in the mall. But like I said, The Rubber Woman, part 1 and part 2 set up a precipice that was not indulged in. Why did you start this in Murder House if you knew you were not going to any of the other places? We didn't go to the Hotel Cortez. We didn't go anywhere else. It was just a waste. It was literally a waste. That ball thing where she's like, I want a baby. And then all of a sudden, I try to gaslight her, ha, 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 jokes. That could have taken place and went into Asylum. Isn't that interesting? I just feel like American Horror Story is so clever. Every American Horror Story is very, very clever. Murder House was super clever in how things were portrayed. Yes, there were some things that were very monotonous of regular life, but that's what makes it so interesting. I believe Asylum and Murder House are on the same scale of greatness. I have some issues with it, but I'll discuss it when I make my individual video. Coven was super good. Again, there's issues like the black witches being absent and all the white witches being put up. They talk about it and they have commentary about it, but it's like, if don't have commentary if you're not going to show up. And Ryan Murphy did not show up. All the black witches got killed. End of discussion for that. Freak Show, super clever, very clever. I don't think it's on the same scale as Asylum and Murder House, but it was hitting there. It was hitting close to it. Hotel was absolutely a downgrade from what I was expecting, but it's still in the same ballpark. Roanoke, I appreciate what they were trying to go for, but we do not give credit for mediocrity. So Roanoke it went down in the way that the rest of them were very clever. Cult, everything was very on the nose. And I'm fine with 1 out of like 10 freaking seasons, one of them being on the nose. Cult, all right, okay, fine, Cult. You can get off easy now. Apocalypse, under no circumstance was it good at all. It started better than it, very literally the first episode and the second episode were the best parts of the show. The rest of Apocalypse was treasonous on all accounts and should be burned at the stake, honestly. 1984, he dropped the ball again. He had something he was going for. I feel like it was 3 different things at once. It didn't know what it wanted to be, and it fell for it. It fell from grace. But regardless of how I feel about any of these seasons, there was no excuse for American Horror Stories to not be a little piece of those things. You did it with Murder House. We didn't need to see the Harmons. We didn't need to. I don't care. Honestly, I only criticize the fact that they weren't there now because of what I was expecting. But to be honest, if it was the way I wanted it to be, the way it should have been, where each episode, you could have had a part 1 and part 2 for each of them. That would have made it cohesive. Having a part 1 and part 2 for the first one and then the rest of them be ones is very lazy. It is very lazy, just to let you know. Don't do that part 1, part 2 crap. Make it a full thing. And if it was going to be too long to be a whole thing, then how about you wait instead of trying to hop up on Hulu and get your money, like while everyone's getting their money on these streaming services, and actually take some time, have some passion, and get right. You probably would have had something great here. It would have been nice to have each of these things, to have a part 1 and part 2. If you were too lazy for that, you can admit that. You can say, okay, I've been doing all this. Don't bring up what you're doing in the past because that has nothing to do with this. This is a separate thing. Don't talk about how you were doing Pose because Pose did end lacklusterly. I'm not saying everyone should have had a sad ending or anything like that, or it wasn't realistic. I'm saying that it felt like there was more effort put into it at the beginning of it than at the end. All of a sudden, people are just dead now. Oh, yes, that happens in the community, and I'm not going to argue over what's going on and how realistic it was or not. But I am going to say that when people just disappear, it's really interesting how we don't even get to see, it just seemed like you were trying to get somebody out as soon as possible. Whoever, you guys know who I'm talking about on Pose, the person who just disappeared out of nowhere and they didn't say much about him. They're like, oh, he died, or oh, he did this, but it just seems so interesting that he was gone all of a sudden. It just seemed like he was fired or something. I don't know. I didn't even really look into it, so I'm not going to put that out there, but it just seemed like he was fired and he just disappeared and they didn't have any other way to say other than, okay, he just died. Or, let's just deal with that. Even though he was there the whole time. Literally, we started the show with him and he's gone. But okay. So I digress from that. American Horror Stories isn't good because you didn't follow the line. It's the bait and switch. We expected to see at least a sliver. We didn't have to go to Briarcliff. We could have went to what it is now. It could have been anything else. It could have been the orphanage. We could have went to the orphanage. Do you not remember your own lore that you've created? Honestly, if you had to, why didn't you just have an intern rewatch the show and then make an episode based on a sliver of what that season was about? That's what it should have been. That's what it should have been. This crap of Ball and all this, we don't have enough connection to any of these people to it's like a Goosebumps / special, those specials where it's just a different person every week type of situation. We don't have enough invested in these people for me to care. That stupid thing with the drive-in movie was the worst to me. The worst to me. Because I was like, who are these people? Who do I care? Oh, they're dead. Okay. I don't care. I don't care. You used the woman who was Pepper and you were trying to get people to want to watch it because of her, when that's kind of a lazy way of wanting us to be engaged. You want us to be engaged? How about discuss some things that were in another season? How about be a part of, I don't know. But you didn't do that, did you? I wonder why. I just wonder why. It's almost pathetic. It's almost pathetic. I don't know why you decided to make the first episodes in Murder House, and then the rest of the episodes did not take place in the Freak Show or the Asylum or the Hotel Cortez or literally anywhere we've ever been. What is this? What's the American Horror Stories about it? Why don't you just call it something freak else? Call it something else, Ryan Murphy. You set us up. He literally did the bait and switch. He literally did the bait and switch. Literally did the bait and switch. Literally. I don't have time for this. Like, everyone was so happy to see that Michael Jackson's daughter was going to be in this and she can't act. And if I was Michael Jackson's daughter, you best believe if I couldn't act, I'd be doing something. Maybe she's got stock in something, but that's not good enough for me. For me personally, if I were Paris Jackson, you best believe that I would have stole the show. The person who stole the show was that girl with the red hair, the rubber woman. I thought it was so cool. And I think it was so cool that she said that she didn't watch American Horror Stories, Rubber Man's thing, so that she could do it differently, because men, women, it's cool that there's a difference. It's not just the same with breasts. I was so happy that she did that and took the extra step. She actually looks like she cares about American Horror Story. She actually cares about, even, that's a sort of continuity. Even though she didn't watch it, it was organic, because the Rubber Man was organic when he started. But we didn't get to see Asylum. We didn't get to see the Hotel Cortez. Like, those things don't exist anymore. I'm recording this right after watching Ball with Billy Lord and wanting a baby and all that. So I haven't seen the last 2 episodes, but I am 1,000,000,000% sure we're probably going back to Murder House, because there's these clips that we have yet to see. We haven't seen the Harmons at all. We haven't seen Violet at all. We haven't seen a single person. We've only heard hearsay. We've only seen hirsute. Nothing. We've seen nothing. We've seen absolutely nothing except Infantata. And I could have sworn the man who played Infantata passed away. The only person we saw was someone who wasn't even the person portraying that creature. I don't know what Ryan Murphy is doing, but it's a shame, because this could have been so great. By now, nothing that he can do in the next 2 episodes are going to make me change my mind. So that's why I'm doing this video now. He already wasted it. And if you were going to do part 1 and part 2, you either should have condensed it, which it would have made no sense if you would have condensed it. I already get a sense of cheesiness from the first episode, part 1 and part 2, The Rubber Woman. There is super cheesiness. I think there are way too many girls in that clique. There should have only been like 4, Bratz style. Jade, Chloe, Sasha, and Yasmin. It should have been 4. And one of those people, Paris Jackson. But there were way too many girls. There was like 5. Maybe 3. Maybe there should have just been 3. But honestly, it was too many girls. Too many girls were a part of that clique. And it's just like we're following all of them in this freaking van. There should have only been like 2 or 3. And the 2 fathers who adopted that girl, and then her whole thing where she was kidnapped or whatever, it just seemed like they were adding way too much stuff. They were adding way too much stuff for it to just be part 1 and part 2, and that was it. Even for as long as it was compared to the rest of them, it still didn't get enough time. It got enough time compared to the rest of them. The rest of them seemed to go by like bullets. And he's just not good at doing that. He's good at setting the stage, taking time. American Horror Story Freak Show is the best at this. It tells a complete full story. From Dandy Mont being a little wimp to him being an absolute psychopathic killer. He did that well. He's condensing, he started to condense his crap. Hotel was one of the ones where he started losing his edge on how to tell a story from beginning to end. And from Hotel to now, it's kind of annoying. 1984 was the most annoying to me personally, because I felt like there was some things that were missing. We didn't get to see the whole, like, it seemed like he was kind of trying to condense it to where, at a neat little bow at the end, when it wasn't earned. Every single neat little bow at the end of every American Horror Story season earned its happy bow at the end. The only one I think does not earn it is 1984, and that's the one I think is the laziest one he's ever made. Again, like I said, I will make a video about all the American Horror Story seasons, but right now I have too much on my plate to even consider starting on it because I have to rewatch them again. But yeah, like American Horror Story is great. The longer he's doing it, the more I see flaws that were not carried through in the beginning. Even Apocalypse was lacking. Yes, it was lacking. At first, it started so strong. It started very, very strong. And then he tried to do twists and turns that didn't make sense. And by the end, I was so not interested in what happened next. I was so not interested, especially since we're still talking about these white power witches, these white Anglo-Saxon of the Cox Mountain witches. How are you going to introduce us to the voodoo queen and all the voodoo magic that she can do? And then we never get to see anybody else do that voodoo magic. We see one woman that they sacrifice because she's supposedly evil in favor of Marie Laveau, who, according to them, was also evil. You know, I just don't understand why we never get to see a bunch of black witches. For every one black witch, there's about 4 or 5 white witches that we see. Yes, they all die basically, except like 2 or 3. But in the end, there's only Queenie left to be a voodoo witch. She's the only one left. And then she dies. But then she came back to life. So yeah, I'm very disappointed in American Horror Stories. There's nothing else to say. There's nothing Ryan Murphy could have done in the last 2 episodes that are supposed to come out soon that will make me change my mind that American Horror Stories is trash. He started making trash a while ago. Like I said, 1984 was a very bad season. Apocalypse was a very bad season. It started off good, like I said, and was trash. 1984 started off okay, and then they added too many things. It got too cheesy. Like I said before, go back and watch Murder House. There are cheesy things there. Like, I met her. Like, just go watch and see that. That was hilarious. It's hilariously cheesy. That guy, Harry O'Hara or whatever his name is, Dennis O'Hara, I think. Dennis O'Hare. He is a very good actor. And when they don't use him, there's something missing. If you're not going to use Jessica Lange, who brings so much to the table, or anybody else who brings a lot to the table, Lily, even Billy Lord brings a lot. She carried the entire episode 5. Just to let you know. Not a single other character in that freaking crap was good. Not a single character was good at all. Just to let you guys know. Don't at me. Bad. Terrible. All the women are, like, when that whole bro house thing, it was too cheesy. That guy was from Pose, and he was one of the weaker actors to me. Bianca was a very good actress. Who else? Electra was a very good actress. Poppy was not a good actor. I'm sorry. He was one of the worst, actually. Angel was a very good actress. Very good actress. Literally, the women are carrying, to be honest. If you're going to have a bunch of bros in a bro house, you have to do something to make sure that they actually hit their marks. Because there was no one hitting their marks in that bro house. It was too cheesy for me, honestly. And that whole, like, no homo thing that they did was very cringe to me. I thought that was it. It went on very, very long. I would have rather it never been there, but I understand that toxic bro culture because I'm surrounded by it being an Xbox player. But it went on for too long. Ryan Murphy, too much. So that's basically it. I'm basically done because I'm not really looking forward to watching the rest of them. You can't, out of 2 episodes, there should be 2 episodes left, according to what it says online. There's nothing he can do differently. He's already ruined American Horror Stories. He's already ruined it. Just to let you guys know, he has already ruined it. He should have went through each season and recreated an instance where it may not have circulated the same characters, but had something to do with each season. Hotel didn't even have to include Lady Gaga. If you were afraid to get people who were not on the payroll to become it, like, you didn't do that with the Harmons. We didn't see the Harmons in the first 2 episodes. We didn't see anybody. We only saw Inventada. I think we saw Bo too, but that was it. People who are obscured by darkness, people who we barely got to see anyway, people who you could have CGI'd into the picture. It didn't matter. You didn't need to pay a single person for that. You just needed to pay for the CGI. There was absolutely 100% no reason why the next episode shouldn't have been Asylum or about Asylum. The next episode after that should have been about Coven, and it should have been about the Voodoo Witches because they don't get as much limelight. Like, the most they could have hoped for was to be prevalent in American Horror Stories, this bootleg side gig cheesy thing that really is gross anyway. I'm kind of glad that you didn't drag them through the mud, but you know what? Since you already had the girls from Pose on the payroll, you could have had them in and brought them in as voodoo queens or people who are studying voodoo, something, anything. I could make your stuff for you. Like, please if you were hurting for writers, I'm a writer. Please hire me. I can literally make scripts for you. But this isn't working. And for certain, Paris Jackson, she can look like she belongs on the silver screen, but she did not bring a lot. And obscuring her behind 5 other girls did nothing for that. There should have been like at most 3 girls that were harassing that redhead girl, because there was too much going on for them to have like 6 girls running after her all night. Made no sense. Basically done, honestly. That whole thing, I forgot to even talk. This was so useless. It was so useless that I didn't care about it. That whole thing where they watched a show or down the rabbit hole or something and then they died or they killed people because they turned into like zombies. And then you had the girl who played Pepper with one eye and then she got her other eye taken out. That whole story can be thrown away. That whole story can be thrown in the trash because it served no purpose. I got nothing from it. It wasn't scary. It wasn't suspenseful. It wasn't even as cheesy as the rest of them. It just was useless fodder. It was useless fodder. Just to let you know, it was useless fodder. It can literally be taken out of the history books. It could literally be erased from my mind and I not lose a day of sleep. It had no continuity with anything, had no characters to connect it back to. It connected to no season. It had absolutely nothing to do with anything. So why was it in my face? I don't even remember what it was called. I don't even remember what that episode was called. I don't remember basically any of them except the Rubber Woman, because it has to do with the original story. And it's called American Horror Stories. You'd think that they would be all connected to each season. That's what I thought we were getting. That would have been perfect. That would have been so perfect to get people back into watching these things, to watching your shows. You missed the mark, Ryan Murphy. This is an ode to you. Do better. I loved Pose and what you tried to do with it. There were some things that I didn't like that maybe I'll make a video about Pose, but it's not my realm. It's not my realm. I like horror things. I like scary things. I like thriller things. I like suspense things. I like the ballroom, but it's not my realm. So it's hard for me to talk about things that the only thing I can talk about is ethnic, like the ethnic side of Pose and what you did with colorism and how you treated certain characters. And that's basically all I could talk about with Pose because I'm not a part of that community. I can't speak on how you portrayed I can't speak on how you portrayed gay men because that's not my lived experience. But what I can tell you about is the fact that I've watched every single season of American Horror Story from beginning to end in almost an entire sitting one time. And I am ashamed. So it's a darn shame that you did not take this opportunity, that you had all this time to collect a situation, to collect an idea and execute it properly. American Horror Stories could have been great if each episode, and I believe that this could have been done if each episode had a part 1 and part 2, because like I said, I don't know if it's because it's the only one that connects to the rest of your story, American Horror Story seasons, but The Rubber Woman was the only one that felt like a complete story. The rest of them, fodder, garbage, utter trash. The characters are unbelievable. They're caricatures. They are not characters. They are caricatures of people. The first episode the first season of American Horror Story was the best one to me. It's not my favorite. It's the best executed one for me. It's the best executed. And I don't know if that is the reason why The Rubber Woman succeeds so well, or if it's because it's got part 1 and part 2. But that's the reality of it, honestly. The rest of them, the one about the drive-in movie, stupid, dum-dums, and bad. I will never watch it again. I will never watch it again. The one about the bro house, cringe, constant cringe continuously. And it did not go deep enough into how scary bro culture truly is, because they didn't bring no girls over there and they didn't do anything. And I'm not saying that should have been like romanticized. I'm saying that they got killed anyway. So why didn't you go all in? You just kind of grazed over toxic bro culture. And you are a man. And even though you are a gay man, you still know what cisgender men do. You still know. Look at what's happening at Blizzard. This could have been the perfect opportunity for you to vocalize how you disagree with what's going on with Blizzard, how they treated the women there. The bro house was no different. The hype house was no different. They had girls in there, and I know it. And they weren't there because they were equals. They're borderline groupies to them. The one about that girl in that totem, it just seemed everything was too fast. Every single episode you made for American Horror Stories was too fast. Too many things happened. Too many things we got to keep up with. Each one should have been part 1 and part 2, and each one should have followed each season, counting down to the new seasons, the double feature. Now, what do we have here? We have absolutely nothing that is going, no legacy will be left with these things. It could have been so great. We don't know what happened to Kit's children when they got older. That could have been talked about when you dealt with Asylum. We never see any thriving black witches who aren't evil. That could have followed Coven. Freak Show kind of just fell off. It was a very cohesive, complete story, but you could have added more to that. What about that girl whose mom was Patti LaBelle? How come we don't follow her doing something? Maybe she tries to speak to Dandy to ask where her mom's buried from the grave. You didn't even have to add him. You didn't even have to put that boy on the payroll. It could have just been you have no problem using a Ouija board for no reason in this ball episode or whatever it's called. Who would use a Ouija board to talk to the devil? The Ouija board is to talk to dead people, not the devil or the demons or whatever they were trying, whatever you were going for that. It looked like Baphomet. So that's what I got from that. You don't use the Ouija board to talk to Baphomet. Just to let you know, just saying. You're usually so good at keeping things a decent structure to where people who are ignorant of the occult can follow. But people who actually know the occult, people who actually know what's going on, it looks crazy. It looks super crazy and weird and strange. Like I said, there's nothing he can do to change this. He's already ruined it. He has already neglected the rest of his seasons that made American Horror Story so great. Do you think that if Murder House was the only American Horror Story, would people like it as much? Would you have been able to sell as much merch? The most merch I've ever seen sold was from Freak Show and Coven. We Wear Black is still said to this day. We Wear Black on Wednesdays is still said to this day. Ryan Murphy, why didn't you talk about any of the witches or the voodoo queens or the voodoo witches? How come there were no men voodoo witches? You could have used that boy that you used in that freaking bro house, hype house crap. And he could have went to go search for his grandma or went to New Orleans for the summer. Something. Get better writers to help you because these stories are very bad. They're very bad. I am so sorry for anyone who enjoyed it. They're bad. They're bad. And they're too quick. The only one I felt was cohesive was the one that was the longest. And it had bad acting in it. None of the girls really could act except the girl with the red hair. And it seemed like you chose her because she was the best one. You chose her correctly. If you had to put Paris Jackson up in here because she's famous, she could have been surrounded by at least two girls, two different ethnicities, by the way. Not just a bunch of white girls running around screaming, okay? Could have been the Asian girl could have stayed, and the freaking ambiguous black girl could have stayed. Ambiguous. Yes, she's ambiguous. But the rest of them could have shoved off. There were too many girls in that house. There were too many girls in that clique. There was like five. There was no reason to have so many girls. Like, why didn't they get caught? That was insane. There was too many. It was almost a joke to have them in the wall because there was like 60 girls in there. And like I said, each one had his own cheese. Every American Horror Story season was cheesy in some way, but it made sense. The cheesiness made sense. Like, for instance, Freak Show, when Danny Mont's mom was driving around and she was like, "Oh, hello, do you do parties?" And it was freaking Twisty the Clown who just killed someone. That was corny. But it was funny corny. It was funny corny. And I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that she's such a good actress and that man's such a good actor. But I don't see the charm in American Horror Stories on Hulu. That is why he put it on Hulu, because he knew this was a hit or miss thing. And if you weren't prepared for this, why did you put it out? You have control over your own stuff. You have control over your own stuff. So something has to change. I don't know what it is, and I've given you multiple reasons why I don't like American Horror Stories on Hulu. I'm basically done. I have nothing else to say. I'm probably not going to talk about the last two episodes because they're not, like I said, he can't take 9 seasons or 10 seasons, however many seasons he's on right now, and cram them in 2 episodes. He could have literally taken time to make each episode in American Horror Stories to be connected, no matter how small the connection was. We were freaking in Murder House. So why weren't we at least around the asylum? Someone actually gets put in an asylum and we don't even get a call back to that. We don't even get Domo ni ni conetta la sanaplomo somple pomo pom. We don't get that. We don't get nothing. We don't get nothing that connects any of the other things to the other things, except a surprise face here and there. Oh, wait, look, that looked like Pepper, but that's not Pepper. That wasn't Pepper. That wasn't any person she's ever played. That was another character. Oh, look, that looked like Twisty the Clown, but it's not Twisty the Clown. It's some random dude that's living in a trailer. There's nothing that connects to any of the other episodes, so why did you call it American Horror Stories? You bait and switched us. That is why. You baited and switched us because you made us assume that each episode was going to be about the season or surrounding the season. And you dropped the ball. You could have brought back the voodoo witches. Oh my goodness, one of the best villains of all time we never ever see again. We never see again. We never hear anything about him again. Papa Legba. Papa Legba has never been even referenced again. He was one of the best characters of all time. And we never see him again. We never see him making any deal with anybody else. Does it have to be the exact same person? I would like it to be. I would like some continuity, but it doesn't have to be. He could literally have different people. He could have a woman helping him. He could say, I take many forms. It could be him as someone else. It could be anything. But you know what? I don't think you care enough because this doesn't show that you cared. This just seems like a quick grab. Oh, let me just put this on Hulu so I can get some Hulu money. That's really what that feels like to me. Because American Horror Story, the series, is brilliant and it actually seems like it's thought out. Recently, it seemed like you've been really lazy. I repeat, it seems like you've been really lazy. Like I said before, 1984 is one of your worst seasons yet, and it makes the end is so not earned. There is nothing earned in this. It was crazy. The one ear thing, are you serious? Gross. And then Apocalypse, retconning things. You're not a retconner. You never retconned things. Why are you retconning things now? And then just you only bring back white witches, and then the only black witch that's there, the voodoo witch, gets sacrificed. Interesting, Ryan. Interesting. So I'm done. Like I said, I'm done. I'm done talking about American Horror Stories. Hopefully, it's just like Infinite Darkness with Resident Evil. It's just something that was there as filler, as fodder. It's nothing. At least the first 2 episodes, the part 1 and part 2, Rubber Woman, actually felt like it was a part of this universe that you're trying to create. You're trying to create, just like there's an MCU, you're trying to create an AHS universe. And I thought we were going to have it. I assumed each episode after the first part 1 and part 2 was going to relate somehow, maybe at the end when it all came together like Saw, it's like dun-dun-dun, 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 dun-dun-dun. Like I thought something was going to click and everything was going to connect. But no. My hopes were high and you dropped them, Ryan Murphy. Thank you for ruining it. Subscribe if you like if you like. Let's talk about it in the comments. What's your favorite American Horror Stories episode? What's your favorite American Horror Story season? I will put mine in the description. And you guys already know. But I will talk about why. If you ask me or if you talk about why you like something, I'll comment on that. So hope you like I said, I'm streaming We Happy Few on Twitch right now. So go to Twitch and you can see the playbacks, or return back to my YouTube channel if you'd like to see the highlights edited. They're very long because I love to take my time in We Happy Few. I stopped playing Resident Evil 0 because it's a freaking long game and I don't want time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. It's very intricate and I'm running out of bullets and I'm running out of freaking stuff. I could probably reset and do better, but honestly, I don't feel like it. Done.